So today we're going to talk about two things. First one is going to be how to persuade others to care about climate change. And then the second one is what we can do as a church. I've got some handouts now with just factoids. If you've ever, when someone comes up to you, remember we were talking about zombie arguments last time, the ones that won't die. Like this can't be man-made. This is a very nice synopsis from the New York Times. They put together with all the big Q's, big questions, such as how do we know there is climate change, and should we just give up? The answer is no. And so that is nice. And then another one that we had in our local was, and I don't think you can see it here in your home, but it was the prognostication of what's happening to the Olympic glaciers. And it was in the 23rd Peninsula Daily News. And the study shows that in 70 years, the glaciers will be gone. And the ramifications are enormous, of course, for our water supply and our climate around the peninsula. And probably won't affect many people in this room, except for Andrea. She's going to be living to 200, I'm sure.
Wow. Did you take a special life?
But it will affect our children, and it will affect our children's children. And I think back to that wonderful book we did with Wayne at the either Wolf or Dog, that in many Native American cultures, you think of the seventh generation. And oftentimes we're just thinking about tomorrow or this afternoon. And so it is very important that we plan now to avoid the worst of climate change. All right. And so I'd like, John, would you please start with us from Isaiah 24, 4-6.
The earth dries up and withers, the world languishes and withers. The heaven languishes together with the earth. The earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed laws, violated statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for the guilt. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth dwindle, and 2 people are left.
So says the word of God. Ouch, yes. Okay, let's see where she's.
What was that, John? Isaiah?
This is 4-6.
Isaiah 4-6.
What chapter?
Chapter 24.
Yeah.
I'm often asked, how do we make people care about climate change? And we often proceed that with the assumption that people don't have the right values they need. And somehow we have to figure out how to instill new values into people well past the age where that's even really possible. If you have children, if you've been around children, you know that at an early age it is possible to instill values. And we know that as an adult, sometimes our values can very slowly and somewhat reluctantly change. But overall, trying to change large numbers of people's values in order to care about an issue is not going to work. But here's the good news. The good news is that I'm convinced that 99% of us, perhaps even more, not 100%, but almost, 99% of us already have the values we need to care about climate change. We just haven't connected the dots. In other words, there are already things that we value, things that we hold dear, things that we love, things that we're concerned about. And these things are being affected by the impacts of a changing climate and or would benefit from solutions to a changing climate, but we just don't realize it. And here's the beauty of it. When we approach people from a perspective of, you already care, let me help you connect the dots. First of all, we're not approaching them from a judgmental perspective. Because if you approach somebody with the underlying assumption that you don't care about the right things, you don't have the right values, that perspective can leak through subconsciously. And we are very good as humans at picking that up, that judgment and that condemnation, that self-righteousness and that holier than thou attitude. So rather than approaching people with, I need to fix you or you need to fix yourself, if we approach people with, I'm sure you do care, but you just haven't connected the dots yet. Let me help you connect the dots, and this is really important, to show that not only are you already the perfect person to care, in fact, you do care, you just haven't realized it, but this is very key. By acting on this issue, we are an even more genuine expression of who we are. So it isn't that caring about climate change isn't inconsistent with who we are. It's that caring about it and acting on it is a genuine and authentic expression of who we are, and it enables us to express who we are more fully. And that's what we all really want to do. We want to be who we are. So when it comes to understanding the barriers that we've put up, it's really important, I think, to recognize also that the barriers are not just lack of understanding. People say, well, people don't know enough information, so we just need to hit them upside the head with more information. Well, the real problem, though, unfortunately, is this, and social science over the last 10 years has showed this very clearly. First of all, we haven't connected the dots between what we care about and how that's being affected by climate change. So we tend to think, well, I'm not the right person to care. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not a tree hugger. I don't vote for the right political party. That's just not who I am. Then the second problem we have is one called psychological distance. We humans are very bad at recognizing the risk or the threat posed by issues that we believe are far off in space or in time. In other words, if we think they'll affect us in the future, but not now, or if we think they affect people far away, but not here, we are really good at pushing those to the side. And then the third problem is solution aversion. Many of us believe the only solutions are unpleasant solutions, unpalatable solutions, solutions that will make our lives worse rather than better, solutions that, frankly, I'd rather have the impacts rather than the solutions to. So how do we address these real problems? We address them through exactly what we're talking about, through talking about climate change, through connecting the dots between what we already care about, why it matters, and what we can do to fix it. So the same steps that we just saw as the problems can be turned into solutions.
All right.
Leave us now.
So she talks a lot about connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots.
And what we can find amongst ourselves and others that we care about and how that relates to climate change. Can you think of things that you know, perhaps that aren't obvious, or things that people care about that we can connect to climate change?
Reliable food supply.
Yeah, yep.
I'm sorry, again.
Reliable food supply.
Oh, no.
The future of my 6-year-old niece.
Yeah, we were talking to our son yesterday, and he's 28, and he may, he's gonna live 70 years from now, probably, and he's gonna see all these things. And it's very, very overwhelming. I think you're leaving that. And he said to us, well, my generation really dislikes you baby boomers, because you left us a broken world. And it's kind of true. We enjoyed so much affluence in this country at the expense of others for the future.
How about the ability to turn on the air conditioner when it's really, really, really hot? I think most of us would kind of like to be able to do that. Will we be able to do that? Just in terms of energy availability.
Yes. It is ironic, isn't it, that you turn on the air conditioning to fix the thing that climate change has wrought.
Well, but, we hope that energy is still going to be there in the future, just that it'll be cleaner and carbon free.
That brings up another point she brought up. Are the solutions worse than the problem? I think a lot of people think you're going to take away my energy, or you're going to siphon energy, and I won't be able to turn on my air conditioner. Do you think that's true?
It could be if we don't get things going that are clean energy now.
True.
Electric vehicles
I was,
like
Yeah.
electric semi-trucks.
And the cost of those are, at this point in time, the cost of electric vehicles are really prohibitive for many of us. Um, So that's one of those issues.
Mhm. It is funny though, and I don't know if it's the media I'm reading, but they're talking a lot about the big car companies saying things are, like Ford and GM saying they're gonna have 30 different kinds of EVs, electric vehicles by 2035. And below $30,000. So I think they realize that the price is prohibitive right now, that's for sure.
If you're poor, that doesn't sound very good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it doesn't sound very good if you're poor.
Mhm.
Especially if there's not used vehicles that are available.
One nice thing about electric vehicles is maintenance on them is almost nothing. Because they have so few parts compared to internal combustion. So you're gonna see a lot more used ones available at lower prices, but probably not in the next decade.
I have a Prius, a hybrid. I've never done brakes, I've never done anything.
Really? Wow. That's neat. Not so with our Saturn.
No.
Talking to conservatives, I think I would bring up that our generals, our military have labeled climate change as a threat multiplier, not just a threat, but a threat multiplier. And that should have an effect on a lot of people that are focused on the military. The other problem that's there that's going to get worse is immigration. People want to get away from where food is scarce and go to where it's plentiful and where the economy is good. And, we've got immigration problems now, not particularly in our country, not particularly climate related yet, I don't think, but it's going to get worse. I can't help but think desperate people are going to figure out a way to go around, over, under, or through a fence, and it's just going to be a huge problem in the future.
Yes.
I think health is another issue. We're all, whether rich can sort of take care of their own problems, but the poor, they're just, they have to live in squalid stuff, and so that is just the cost of health is something.
The folks that live next to those coal burning power plants, coal fired plants.
And I think that's also something that we can talk about from a Christian perspective. We may have enough food to eat, but we care about those people who are suffering far away from us or downtown from us, and that's one of our roles in this world, is to take care of those people. And they're being, I think we talked about that last time, they're being unevenly affected by climate change.
As I walk, I have a route that I walk in a larger neighborhood. And I often talk to a man who plants a huge garden and gives away huge amounts of that garden. But he has also talked about the fact that we are simply in a cycle of climate. And I think he said like 10,000, every 10,000 years, the climate changes or something like that. So if you believe that, then there's really nothing you can do, it would seem to me. It's simply a cycle that happens.
I appreciate what you just said, but I studied resource management in college, and it isn't that change is a problem. Change is, that from an evolutionary cycle, change has always been present. It's the rate of change. And it's the rate of change that is due to human influence that is accelerating change to such a degree that species are struggling to keep pace.
That'd be interesting to ask him if he believes that's accelerating. It is not something I've debated with him, but I'll ask him at some point.
Yeah.
If you look at the handout I gave, that's one of the points they have.
No,
Is this just a
that makes
natural
sense.
cycle?
I understand that.
No,
I don't
no,
know
I
if he
mean-
does.
I guess one of the points that I got from her lectures is that when you come up against these arguments, you need to have a very short reply, short factual reply. Well, that is untrue because we're actually in a minimum for sun output or something like that. Then you quickly go into a value you share. And that way you can say, something like, yes, but boy, we really have to address it, even if it is part of a cycle or something like that. It's not changing what we care about, I guess. Because she also makes a point that facts really,
Mhm,
too many facts, people just turn you off.
mhm.
So I guess what I'm saying, there is a technique to deal, so that he feels good leading that conversation and you feel good leading that conversation. I know.
I'm not sure if I'm the one to do that.
Well, and the hardcore people are just gonna ignore the fact,
Yeah.
and just deny it.
But remember, she says that's only like 6% of people.
Yeah, and I wonder if it isn't higher than that.
Yeah.
Maybe where we live too, or something, I don't know, maybe
You know,
clusters.
it's not just climate change, it's evolution, it's vaccines, and public health. People
Yeah.
just want to live in denial. It's, I think, more like a third of the people in this country than the 7% that she came up with.
I like her talking about the solutions too. Can you think, we were talking about the positive solutions, and one of the things we can think about is how we can have an impact on the big companies that are responsible for most of the greenhouse emissions. And I think as we're going through these talks and these discussions, let's think about that. Let's think about what impact we can have in the larger view of these. Okay, we got a little bit of a late start, so I'm going to do the next one. Next video. Oh, there she is, good. The samba.
So the first piece of advice I would give to any community, any organization, and any church that wanted to address climate change is, and you won't be surprised when you hear me say this now, talk about it. Bond, connect, and inspire. Why is talking so important? Because surveys show that while the majority of us accept the fact that climate is changing, and we agree that it will affect future generations of plants and animals and people in developing countries, none of us think it will affect us, and we don't talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, why would we care? And if we don't care, why would we act? People often say, well, talking about it, it seems kind of almost like a cop-out. It's such a low-key response to such a large global challenge. But here's the thing. Talking about it can be the first domino, in a good way this time, not a bad way. This study was released just this past year, and it found that talking about it, the simple act of having a conversation, initiates a true positive feedback effect. How? Well, first of all, the more we talk about it, the more we know. The more we know, the more concerned we are. The more concerned we are, the more we talk about it. And so, as they say, these findings suggest that climate conversations with friends and family enter into a pro-climate social feedback loop. What do we talk about? We don't talk about the science or how bad it is. We talk about why it matters to us and what we can do to fix it. And then there's another study that also came out this past year that I thought was so encouraging. It talked about how children can make a difference. They looked at children in North Carolina, which is quite conservative state in the United States, and they looked at having those children, middle school children, receive education on climate change, but they didn't track the children's opinions, they tracked the parents' opinions. And what they found is that there was a significant difference in the parents' opinions after the children learned about the issue. That's pretty encouraging. So first is talk about it, and then second is act in community. And the good thing is this will give you even more to talk about. Because again, talking about it is so important, and we can talk about what we are doing, what we've done personally, what our church is doing, what other churches have done, what other organizations have done. Acting is important, but talking about how we're acting is also important. So how can we act in community? Well, here's just a couple of examples. So first of all, you can model good stewardship. Do an energy audit of your building. Figure out how to reduce your carbon footprint and your energy bills. Create a green team of like-minded people to explore ways to reduce your carbon footprint. Make your potlucks and coffee hours zero waste. Look at plant-based foods. And that leads to number 3, share resources. Often people aren't quite sure which light bulbs are most efficient. What type of travel is best? Do you have a solar panel installer you'd recommend? Encourage action, provide resources for people that they can use, facilitate information, facilitate access to resources, and facilitate access to change. And then step number 4, support organizations that care about climate change and reflect our values. Tier Fund is obviously one of those. Arasha is another one, Climate Stewards, Plant with Purpose, Operation Noah. All of these are organizations that embody Christian values, that embody the concepts of stewardship, of caring for the poorest and most vulnerable on this planet, and also preparing for the impacts of a changing climate and reducing our own contribution to the problem.
All right, let's see if I can get her in. They've done something with the music, but all right. So we happen to have our own Paul Stutzman here. Hi, Paul.
The only one.
One and only here.
I was wondering, have we done our energy audit for the building or anything like that?
I don't think we have an energy audit per se.
Okay.
Don, you have an energy audit? I don't think
No,
so.
it was discussed and we haven't.
We haven't done that, yeah.
Do you think it'd be worth doing anything like that?
Probably would, yeah. I mean, we're, we've tried to do what we can to kind of keep the heat off when we're not using it kind of thing. And that's about the only thing we're really focused on. We're putting in, LED lights whenever we're changing things out and that sort of thing. But we haven't done an audit. It wouldn't be a bad idea at all. It's a good idea.
So is there a company that does audit, or you guys?
How do you do it?
Yeah, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably have to get online and see what they recommend.
I didn't know there was like an audit team.
Could some PUD do something
They
along that
might,
line?
yeah,
Oh,
they
yeah.
might, yeah.
Or tell you who, or.
Or we tell you who might come and give you one.
The one thing I was hoping we would be able to do is put energy efficient blinds like the ones we've got in this room in the office when we remodeled it. But since we're already over budget on that, I decided I better not say anything about it, but.
And I would say that I find is probably one of the ballasting. That we don't want to talk about anything too negative. We want to read facts, but we don't want to. So it's an idea of we don't want to pay for everything.
Well,
So-
can you
So
tell,
the car's too expensive, yes, it is, and it's like to say, oh, we can't put in those blinds because they're too expensive. Well, it's just, we don't want to pay the price to the solutions, and they aren't, I don't know.
Well,
They aren't cheap.
I guess I'd agree and disagree with that. I think that we're in a position in 2022 of an amazing precipice. Because, for example, solar panels are half of what they were 10 to 12 years ago. Supply issues aside, which are big, but we talked about the electric cars. I mean, it's very hard to read the paper without seeing something about, battery being made in the United States now because of the supply issue. So things are hopping in good ways. And I think you're absolutely right that it's important to look at the positives, but we have to be willing to be trailblazers for the more expensive things too.
And it's knowing also that what things really make a difference too.
Yeah, the impact now.
So
Yeah.
the putting in the blinds, oh, that's nice, but how much of a, what
Right.
differences does that make if I had to be putting a priority somewhere, speaking up for something,
Mhm.
that it's really knowing what things are really important that we choose to do.
I think that's why getting good information, you were saying about looking up for people who, everything of how to do these. is
So I see
important.
but I saw in the, whenever the yearly report that we're replacing the heater. But I,
Water or
Yeah.
overall?
We have one of our gas furnaces is going, is needs
Oh,
replacing.
that
so-
sounds like an opportunity, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it is, so, you know, and I've kind of gone back and forth with the guy, but I gotta get a hold of him and have him
Mhm.
give us the electric alternative, you
Yeah.
know, and see what that's gonna cost us, and then we'll have to make a decision.
and I heard about, and I guess I read something that was like retrofitting a building, whatever, to code is, especially big buildings is really becomes additional cost prohibitive.
It was funny because we were talking to we were at a party yesterday, and one of the PUD commissioners was there. And he was saying that he's having a very hard time having the other guys listen to him when he's talking about trying to get in place things for 10 years from now, other than hydroelectric. You know, trying to get certain things in place for down the road. There's a lot of resistance. And he's found that very frustrating. So I see what you guys are saying about, you know, we live in a place where it is going to be sometimes an upward battle of this, but I think that we got to keep trying with that. And can I also ask you, Martha, while we have you here, could you talk a little bit about what the other churches are doing?
Well, that is, Barb Maines is a strong advocate at the, where's she at?
Trinity?
Over there.
Oh, United Methodist?
Methodist, maybe. So that she instigated energy audits, but then something happened through the pandemic that the person who came to do them was going to come do them, couldn't, and then, so she had to get another source, and then our interfaith group hasn't been really meeting much the last year, because two different churches, I think who's that? And you did energy audits, but then they haven't got the final reports to share it with us, but they were very reasonable. So whoever was doing it at a very reasonable price, and if you got in with the person was coming and it was cheaper because of her expenses to get in on the deal.
Mhm.
So I don't.
That's the
What question did you ask?
Olympic Unitarian Universals.
Oh, okay. So what question did you ask me? What are the
Oh,
other
that's
churches
a
doing?
consortium. I thought there was kind of a consortium of churches
Well,
that
we
share
haven't been
information.
meeting, so, not too much, but the Trinity has a risk care group that does monthly education things, and Barb was working hard at the church, and I think they replaced all their windows.
Okay.
And that might have been part of their energy audit thing, or something they were just doing anyways. They got a huge church over there to eat. So.
Well, and
Nothing much.
And the Presbytery actually has a program to, you know, get your church to be more environmentally friendly. And Tom had mentioned our last Mission and Outreach Committee, where that's something that we wanted to consider. So then that's something that the Mission and Outreach Group is looking at. And it's basically making a commitment that you're going to do a bunch of things, which would include doing things like the energy audit for your facility and doing those kind of things, and also agreeing to have some sort of education program, and then doing things at services. And I mean, I don't know whether we want to go through all the steps, but it's an interesting thing in terms about, her idea, which is talk about it. Well, this has a whole bunch of ways to commit that you're going to talk about it. Maybe some of them are appropriate, some of them aren't, but I mean, it's something that I don't know how much interest there is in doing it. But I mean, there are things that certainly we could work into in our program. For instance, replacing the furnaces is one of those things that it doesn't seem like that big a deal. And I think, if we were better educated, we might know better. I mean, I know that California, for instance, is trying to get everybody to go electric from the standpoint that, for right now, it's cost effective to do the gas, and a lot of people do it because it's cheaper. The equipment's different, and all the rest of that stuff. They don't need to change things out. But I think, California at least is taking the view that in the long term, we ought to be heating with electricity because we're going to have cheap ways to make electricity, and we shouldn't be burning fossil fuels to create electricity. Because I think over the last, I don't know how many years, we basically just kind of switched from coal to natural gas. So which natural gas is better than coal, but is it as good as a windmill or a solar field? No, it's not. And we've now gotten to the point that both wind and solar are cheaper than the natural gas plant. And I think when the battery technology catches up, we're going to be at a point where we can actually get electricity that's, not polluting. But, I'm not farsighted enough, but I think people are making some of those changes based on the fact that, today, maybe if we change from gas to electric, doesn't make that much difference, but you don't want to have to replace your brand new gas furnace, 10 years from now when you want to be electric. Do you go electric now knowing that, in the long term, we can provide cheaper things? The PUD official that we were at a party with yesterday in our neighborhood was saying that it's so hard to get people to think longer term about what they're looking at. He says his frustration is that, the group with the Bonneville Power Association thinks that hydropower is as clean as you can get. Well, there's a lot of inputs to hydropower. It's not just the water running through, running through the dam in terms of going there. And his point is that, a lot of the other two commissioners are happy to just go along with whatever Bonneville does. Well, Bonneville has no interest in building solar or wind fields because that's not what they sell. They sell hydropower. That's what they do for a living. And his point is that the PUD groups ought to be pushing them to do other things because they can't build more dams. They have dams now, but they aren't building any more dams. So they ought to be looking at building solar fields and putting up windmills and getting that stuff into their system so that they have those things. And his point now is it's cheaper. You can't argue anymore that it's less expensive to run the water through those dams because they're not cheap. Those dams don't run for free. So, but this is an interesting thing. It requires a really long-term look at, where things are eventually going to be, which I think we're now really excited. At least I'm excited we're getting to the point that a lot of these things are now cheaper. So you don't need to argue about whether they're going to be more or less expensive. And, on the cars, we've got General Motors is, where they're going to have electric vehicles across their entire product thing by 2025. And I think once they start building those battery plants and get all that stuff in line, then I think the cost differential between that electric vehicle and your gas vehicle is going to be small.
And if you look at jobs, when they start having to build these and build the batteries and all these things, it's a huge number of jobs. They talk about the number of jobs in Texas for wind and solar being commensurate with those in gas and oil, which is just astounding to me.
Well, I know that there's a local group called Olympic Climate Action, and they've been meeting for 10, 15 years on climate issues. And they're always looking for new people to come and keep the energy going in the group. And they're having a meeting tonight, 7 to 9 on Zoom.
Oh,
I think if you just Google Olympic Climate Action, there's probably a link. Yeah. I used to go to the meetings.
Well, our own church investments are not in the, what do you call it, socially acceptable.
Counselor that we want eco-friendly.
We're already invested in that, yes,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
That's something that would be nice to be known to the congregation too. I think it'd be lovely.
We made that decision, I don't know, what, 3 years ago?
4 or 5, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
At least.
Is it like socially responsible funds?
Yes.
That's what it is? Okay, good. Well, that's neat.
And the Presbyterian Church USA as a whole is divesting its investments from oil. They're trying their best to get rid of that, the investments in.
And Tom was kind of the promoter of that, changing of the investment
neat.
portfolio and
Well,
at
I
the
wasn't.
time, yeah, you were. And at the time, in a positive way, I mean, positive here. And at the time, there was this concern that, we might lose, we might give up, our yield or returns would suffer. And as it's turned out in the last few years, actually, those ESG funds are either equal to or better than just standard funds. They're good companies that are, that are doing good things, managed by good people, and I think it's, and I think the change of groups like our church and individuals that said, hey, this is where we want our money to go to work, has been a promotion for them. So it's one of those things, like you say, when you look at the future and say, oh yes, it could be worse. Well, if you start doing it, it gets better, because then more people are involved and more resources are there, etc. So I think that kind of climate change is the same thing.
Yeah.
If it costs us $8,000 or $10,000 more to put in a electric furnace, we have to decide that. Personally, I think we put in an electric furnace. That those are the decisions you make that sometimes look a little costly in the front end, but as this process is moving, they're proven not to necessarily be the case.
But we don't know yet that it will cost more from.
We don't, yeah, we have to find out, absolutely. We got to get those people in here.
I wonder how many of us have looked at our own personal finances and done social acceptable stuff. I was just talking with a financial counselor. I want to do some investments and I'm struggling with that.
I think it is incredibly important that we make known, and we're talking about personal, and then the community efficacy. I mean, that's, you hit a bullseye on that, about how the church can impact this. I think that's just incredible.
When we talk about the companies that produce all the most of the greenhouse gases, I think, if we can invest in socially responsible funds, then we're kind of voting with our dollars, right? There, and taking away some of the influence that goes, the resources that go to those places. It seems like that tends to change corporate policies. And then also when they get big, like something happens and they get big media feedback that, oh my gosh, people are upset. And maybe for a little short period of time, that's at least pretend they've changed something.
And then strike, yep. Yeah.
I wanted to say I bought bamboo toothbrushes yesterday. I went to the store to get toothbrushes and I was looking at the options and there was this one little box and it said bamboo. And I was like, oh, but that might be, I don't know how that's going to
Hence I use bamboo toothbrushes.
Yes.
It worked. So, and it was a cardboard box and I felt it. It was like 4 toothbrushes and I was like, is that plastic in there? Did they wrap each toothbrush in plastic? I don't know. But they didn't. It was paper.
Right.
Each one was wrapped in paper and they worked just fine. Yes.
Show
So
us
proud of
your
myself.
smile, Vicky.
Yes.
But plastics drive me nuts. And so,
Oh, the single-use plastic drives me absolutely insane.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, all right. So anything else? I think this has been fabulous. I just love it. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you. I think we've got so much information just in this little get together that it'd be so wonderful to share it with the congregation. That's her last comment here is, if you were to lead a church service on climate change, what would you do? And I think just letting people know what options are open to them, what the church has done, what the church hopes to do, with the idea that the solutions are not going to be horrible. The solutions are pretty darn good.
And I think if you had like a paper they could take also, what the church is doing, this is what we're doing, or this is what we're gonna do, and then maybe what you can do at home, like buying bamboo toothbrushes, I mean, things like that, because not everybody just, can think of those things off the top of their head, or is gonna bother looking it up, but
And
they're
one
just
of
not
those-
aware, they just don't think about it.
And I think having a green team for this would be very nice and we've talked about it in mission outreach to do so that we can keep giving people small bits of information.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, so it's not like, here, read this 300-page treatise.
no, they're not
It'll be
gonna
all
do
right.
it. Yeah, small steps, you can do it, your house.
All right.
I love what she said too about, don't be trying to change people's value, you can't change their values, but you can try to connect with what is common, which is that we all do care about the ones we love and figure out, connect the dots of what will be impacted that we already care about. And don't go overboard with facts, it's about connecting on kind of more the heart level.
And start from a place of respect.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, okay. All right, why don't we pray? Thank you, dear Father, for this opportunity to get together, to learn so much about each other and the things that we do personally as a church and globally. And please help us go forth and take care of your world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.